Well, when I got a call a few weeks ago from the guys at KTM Australia to come out here to Conedale, first get out of bloody New South Wales weather and come into this glorious sun-drenched Queensland, to come to their 2023 motocross range launch on all new generation bikes, to me it was like a godsend because I knew the exact guy for the job. And I'm standing next to him. His name's Mike Sleeter. He's been out here for 18 months now. But what's significant is that Mike was, for 15 years with KTM North America, was what he calls a test rider. But what he's really doing was developing their future models 2, 3, 4 years ahead. So, first of all, fantastic to have you here, Mike.
Yeah, it's been an amazing 18 months, meeting a lot of good people, spending more time with yourself and other media sources, and reconnecting with old friends and meeting new friends.
And so the significant thing, I guess, about these bikes is, really when you look at what KTM's done in terms of their generation. So 2019, 20, 21, 22, not a lot of changes in that range. So there's a big change in 16, and then in 19, Mike was part of developing the platforms of both of those, and I think you call the 19 through 22 the fourth generation.
Yep.
But the cool thing is that, we get to invite him out here, and this thing, it doesn't have your fingerprints on it, bro. So yeah. I'm going to ask you, it's going to be so hard. You're going to have to go top line because you know so much about these bikes. But. Yep. And their lineage, where they've come from. But I guess, in a nutshell, Mike rings you up and goes, how are the new generation ones different?
Yeah, and that, like you nailed it. I had involvement up until 22. I'm riding my personal bike's a Gas 450, that bare bones model of the KTM group. And I know what it does good, I know what it does bad, and those bad things I highlight to me, right? So and as I finished my journey through KTM, they were just starting this generation model. So I have not ever rode one of these bikes ever until today. And that's a true, there's no, I'm not biased to anything, right? I'm just face value, what it is, and yeah, it's really cool to see. There's very smart people at that company. They're very aggressive. And I've had some very flattering messages, like, they'll never be the same once you left. And I just have to chuckle because, wow, have they brought the heat this year in 23. All those little nuances that I was really hoping they were going to fix across the range. They did, and then they brought some tech that I forgot about, like the quick shift that I tried in 2017. And then they, bring an EFI system that I never saw, never touched. And it's like...
On the two-stroke?
On the two-stroke, sorry. Yeah, so it's like the EFI system on the two-stroke. I never saw. I rode TPI. So you think about that. I was developing bikes up until 18, and in 4 years, they bring out a full new platform motor and a two-stroke. That's quick.
So what are the first things that jumped out about it? I mean, we went to a tech presentation last night. There's a lot of talk about the chassis, the more remote, shock mount, I guess, and it creates this anti-squat. Did that deserve the billing? That's a big part of this bike? I mean, look, obviously there's been change of bodywork, engine, swing arm frame, subframe. Now got alloy ends, plastic subframe. But is that anti-squat a kind of a key element of this generation? Yeah,
and let me take one step back on that before I answer that question. I'm visually watching professional racers racing these models in the factory edition state. Yeah. And we've heard a lot of struggle with the bike. Cooper Webb's struggling. Other people are changing motors, this. So I'm like, that's really odd that KTM would go backwards. Last night, Rob T gave us an amazing presentation, to the KTM Australia group of that new design of that wishbone where that shock's connected to at the top eye instead of being up top, and it's all making sense to me now. I'm like, wow, I really understand that pressure, that twitch that I feel on my 450 when that swing arm comes up. It's driving that shock lever forward, where that shock was mounted before. It's putting pressure on that fork, and that a lot of talk in the last let's call it 8 years of 4CS. Now the air has been the fork about KTM, the fork, never about the shock, and they changed the shock frame design, really encompassing a more rigid frame. They have a different position, and today there wasn't any talk about fork.
Yeah,
because
fascinating, huh?
Right, we're talking about shock, but the chassis design, the stiffer chassis, all the data and tech that they showed us on paper really correlated today. It was quite impressive.
I think you said when you came in before, we're talking about the shock. No one's talking about the shock today because you said before you were very mindful of it, but now from what you were saying, it's less of an isolated thinking process of how the fork is working, but it's more collectively how the new frame, swing arm, shock is all collectively working harmoniously. I think you said that it actually was plusher, but still as firm. Yeah,
so they've stiffened up the chassis from really the front to rear, right? Within the head tube stiffer, it's got a gusset up top by the steering stem. They've just made it more rigid through and through. what I had like an epiphany was like, of course, we were the bikes were relying on the fork and shock to do all the work. But you had a bit of a harmonic tone. When you rode a KTM, you got used to it. Like you landed, boosh, and like everyone's like, oh, it's 4130, and like, early on the front fender would flex a lot. They've improved that fender flex now. It's even, of course, even better this year in 23. But when they started stiffening up this chassis and the swing arm and moving the points of engineering and pivots of everything, counter shaft sprocket back, and just getting everything realigned, tilting the motor, really refining a pretty damn good chassis. What they've done is took some stress off the fork and shock.
Yeah.
They gave that shock and fork a bit of relief to not do all the work for it. They did, I think, go backwards a little bit overall on all the bikes. Maybe the entrance into the turn on a deep rut, but guess what? Once you start entering it, it's like you almost feel like you can take your hands off like a roller coaster. The drive through the turn is phenomenal. I have no problem turning down. It's just the bike that's not flexing back and forth. But what they gain overall comfort. They've just improved. Like, we're standing on top of like that famous Conondale ski jump, and on my bike that I've ridden here before, my personal bike, it has air forks, not cone valves or anything. I land and it hard landing. Well, this bike, with the added rigidity in the frame, the gussets, the redesign, you land and it's a unit. It lands as a unit. It's not relying on that fork and shock.
Talk a little bit about bodywork. A little bit more symmetrical. Looks like a little bit wider seat, a little bit higher, taller, flatter seat. A little bit more to grab with your calves, I guess. But almost slimmer and much longer shrouds up here up front.
Yeah, the attention to detail on the ergonomics is really good. I've gone through the process with the KTM group doing it. It's very crude, very hands-on, and to know what they've done and just improved something that's already proven to be good. Like, I think the ergos were one of the best in class, but KTM always had probably one of the worst seats in the class. Not a lot of surface area. Looked good in the showroom, looked fancy, but there wasn't a lot of meat in the seat foam. So your first impression riding across the paddock was quite harsh, and you like use that correlation to sitting in a Recaro seat. Like it's firm, might be not comfortable, but it's built for speed.
Yeah.
Well, now they've just really worked on overall comfort. It's not soft like a couch, but it's got some girth. It has some taper in it. It has the rubber-mounted triple clamps now, if you want that.
Which you can remove, so you can
remove. Yeah, you have the option. Yeah. So they've really just buttoned up everything to highlight this more rigid chassis.
Yeah. Look, I know, from your history with KTM, you know how to get yourself out of pro rider mindset, right? Even though you're hanging pro rider circles, but the real question is you're developing a bike for the average punter, right?
Yep.
So is this bike better for a pro out of the box, and is it also better for a punter out of the box? Have they managed to find that added versatility?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andy. This bike is better for the consumer than the 22 model. Like I said before, we've seen it struggle racing. Racing's a niche market. It's a 0.001 percentile, especially at that level. What they've done here is they've given us a better riding experience. They've given us a more comfortable bike, a more sturdy chassis, a safer bike. Like I said, that flex entrance and turn that was easier also comes into play kind of when it's slipperier and harder, it can bite you.
Yeah.
So they've really are finding that fine line of rigidity, comfort, and traction. And in 23, they've really hit the mark, I feel, on just refinement from foot peg. The foot pegs are longer, wider, better pitch. Like they just
narrow mounted. They're cool, huh?
Yeah, as people go through and see the details on the side of what they've changed through and through, they haven't not touched something from the chain guide. The rear chain guide being more sleek, more like the Acropovic factory one. Yeah. They haven't missed a mark on these bikes.
In a way, what you're saying, the sweet spot for setup is kind of like it's wider, right? It gives you more latitude to.
Yeah, that broader, PDS days in KTM, you were within 6 clicks if your tuner wasn't there. Today, you can have a setting from a sand track like Coolum or Wonthaggi to you were at Conondale. It's hard packed today. We had some great ruts and moisture, and I don't think you'll be 1 and 2 clicks even if that. You can just take it out, do your thing. It's a very compliant chassis, and fun to ride. Fun. That's like the big thing. Fun.
Yeah. And look, I know we're going to talk about the 2-stroke range and 4-stroke range separately, but before we go right now, I'm going to have to ask you what was your favourite in each of those respective ranges, the 2-stroke and the 4-stroke. It looked like you had a glint in your eye for the 450. I'll know that much, right?
Yeah. So I think talking 4-stroke, my favourite personal bike that I would take home with me today is the 350. I really like the 350. I always liked it, but they keep refining it. It's got tons of power. I like to rev my bikes a little bit more. It's fun. The gear package was perfect. But the most improved bike in 23 is the 450.
Yeah.
They've improved it. My current bike's a MC 450 gas. I dislike the heaviness in my hand. The delivery has a bit of it's harsh on landing and it has a bit of vibration. 23, all that's changed. They've firmed up the chassis, got rid of that slap down harshness. They've got a better ECU package. They've just done everything that I'd hoped they have done. And like I said, they've really taken the refinement and didn't go backwards in any way. Like I said, other than that little bit of dipping into the turn, which that's my style. The 450 was most improved in the 4-stroke range. My personal bike I take home is the 350.
Right.
But overall, as a package, the 450 is the star of the show.
And on the 2-stroke side?
300 EFI, that was incredible. 250 EFI and 125. I would actually have to say that the 250, I thought I was going to want that 300, but it has a lot of power. It was hard out here today. They're doing some refinement still with the ECUs.
I think it's still a prototype mapping.
Yeah, their mapping isn't final. Pre-production mapping, not finalized, which is the jetting, right? The mapping is the jetting, and we had a long talk about that and how it worked, but I think they're close, not always dialed. But rest assured, if you're a 2-stroke guy, they didn't lose. It doesn't feel like a TPI 2-stroke. It has that bark, that has that snap. It just has that safety. If it's not bogging, it's going to work all the time. You're not going to mess around with lean here, rich there. I think there's still some refinement to do with the tune, with when maybe, and I think it's more where the needle would typically be.
Sure. But
overall performance, it's better than the carbureted bikes are now today.
And not as big a jump as, say, from going from a carb to a TPI bike. A lot of
the feeling of the motor character is the same as the carb. Yeah. I think you're just going to have a more efficient system with the EFI. But the 300 was just impressive to have a bike that was like wow factor fast. It was
I saw your face when you got off for the first time.
Yeah, I had to actually, can't confirm or deny which map I want, because the green, which is the strong map, was that strong that I was going back and forth, which is best. And I think later in the day, I'd probably go to the slower map, and I typically like the aggressive one.
Yeah.
The 250, I went to the green map. It ran, it was really just a solid unit. But the 125 was improved from the current setting with the carb. They didn't go backwards on that. It creates good power. Once again, I think their tune's almost there. It's not final tune, so I look forward to testing that furthermore.
Yeah.
But man, like these young kids, they're going to be stoked. These dads aren't going to have a big jet box, but maybe they'll have a laptop on there. There's a lot of room for electric start as well. Wow, I reached for the Kickstarter a few times on the 2-strokes, and I rode my personal 125 before I left. Before I came out here on Sunday, so I had a good reference of that MC 125, same motor package, and they didn't go backwards. That's for sure.
Well, mate, it's been great having you out here, mate. I mean, having that history with the brand for so long, and even though you say you haven't got your fingerprints on none of your DNA in this, I mean, these things are based off a platform that came before it, albeit significantly changed. So, can't wait to sit down and have a chat to Mike about all the 2-stroke and the 4-stroke range as well, and. Hang out, keep an eye on the site. We're gonna drop those things. We talk. God, there's so much to talk about, bro.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in more detail. Eh?
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me out. KTM Group rolled out the red carpet for us today. Conradale track, it turned on. The weather was great. So yeah, thanks for having me out, Andy.
That was awesome.